Hello, and welcome to the podcast, Trial Lawyer Prep. I'm your host, Elizabeth Larrick, trial lawyer turned consultant, here to help lawyers clearly communicate their cases in order to win. In today's episode, we will directly speak to how we can hold people's attention and not lose it. We have 8 seconds to grab people's attention. We already know as lawyers that attention spans are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. It really doesn't matter who your audience is. It could be a judge, a mediator, opposing counsel, it could be a jury. Either way, we have 8 seconds. And if we lose that 8 seconds, it is costing you verdicts, winning motions, even possibly even settling cases quicker. So this episode, I want to talk about how we can work through that 8 seconds to grab attention, but also to avoid cognitive overload, giving people too much at one time. And so I want to express all the things that we have found in doing focus group research, in going to trials, and getting the feedback to understand what worked. And of course, we know when it doesn't. So let's talk about our 8-second rule. There's so much research that goes into our attention spans. Tons of marketing companies pour millions of dollars into figuring out what is the attention span. And right now, most current research, I would say, is 8 seconds. So what we really want to know is how to get that 8 seconds down and keep their attention. And we've seen this before. If you've watched any of the CLEs that talk about opening statements, if you've read any of the fabulous books that are out there about setting up and structuring opening statements, you will know that the instruction, the request, is to start with a hook. Start with a simple attention-grabbing sentence. This case is about boom, boom, boom. Or starting with a statistic, because we want to grab that attention, right? Get those brains going. And the other thing that we want to make sure that we do is then be able to keep that attention without overloading or overwhelming our brains. Typically, what happens is we unknowingly provide a bulk of information that overwhelms our brains and they end up being turned off. If when you're speaking, you're giving folks a good rundown of the case, maybe you run down the evidence, maybe the standard that applies. When you do that, if a juror or anyone in your audience hears a word that they don't understand, or maybe a phrase, or maybe it's just how you've actually phrased the sentence, their whole brain will stop processing anything else and direct all the energy into figuring out that one word, that one phrase, or trying to restructure the sentence to figure out what you're saying. Meanwhile, you're still talking and delivering information and they're not receiving any of it. What happens then? Well, maybe they keep trying to listen. Maybe they go to something else and think about other things. Maybe they think about what they're going to have for lunch. Either way, they're not listening to you, and they either fill in the gap with what they think you said, taking a guess, or they just sit back and just resolve that they're just not going to understand. It makes no difference to them, and they're just not going to pay attention. I don't want that for you. I want you to be able to grab people's attention. I want you to work through cognitive overload. And so we've got 3 plus a bonus that we're going to talk about here today that you can work through. And these are simple things. There are 3 very simple things we can do with any presentation you're about to give. So think about opening statement. Think about mediation. Think about an upcoming hearing that you have. All 3 of these things can be applied to any presentation you're about to give so that you don't lose someone's attention, or you don't sit in their brain on a scavenger hunt trying to figure out a word or a phrase that you use. And again, these are time-tested results. We've done focus groups on these topics read books on these topics, and again, taking these things to trial to test it out. Number one is linguistics or language. We are really known for using some large legal terms, medical terms that really can stump jurors. I see this very often in focus groups, and the easy thing to do is just pair. I know that we have to use certain languages in certain cases. We have to do it. The law requires us. I understand that. I'm not trying to fight against that. But what I want you to do is pair it. And you heard me already do that. When I said linguistic, I paired it with language. So I want to give you a couple other examples that have gone through focus groups, and we have heard directly, right, that these are things that need to be paired. So medical malpractice cases are great examples of this. And we once had a medical malpractice case, and unfortunately the person developed some eschar. Well, that's dead tissue. Now, the lawyer used this word no less than 10 times. And that was the first question we got when I asked for, what do you think? What is your impression from this information? They were like, I don't know what that word is. Even though, right, he may have explained it, because he kept using it, the brain kept getting stumped again and again and again. And so all we did was very simply reduce the amount of times use the word, but also we just paired it together. We gave it a little sidecar, right? Like eschar, dead tissue. Right? It just goes right along together. So they pair together. Another example here recently was uncontrolled intersection. Now, that stumped me because I don't know really what that means. So we paired it together with an intersection without any signal or sign with how to direct traffic. Now that's a long pairing, but it was a key element in the facts of the case that I didn't want to lose the people in the focus group early on. And then I paired it with a picture. I said uncontrolled intersection, showed a picture, and then I paired it. An intersection without signs or signals that direct traffic. Boom. Simple, right? Super simple, right? Again, these are simple tips, but we tend to overlook them. So number one, think language when you're walking through your presentation. How can I pair my language or change the language, remove it altogether to make it very simple? Number two is structure. Number one, let's just have it. A lot of times we put together arguments, we put together presentations, and we don't really think through the structure. So this is where we've talked about rules of three. We're going to say it again, rules of three. Working memory in our brain can hold 3 to 5 things. So if we already say, I'm going to walk through 3 things, we can handle 3, that's easy. But when you can structure it, and a lot of times people say, well, but what if this particular case is going to have 6 different questions in the verdict form? Or what if the law has 5 elements? Okay, so we're getting into the nitty-gritty here. When we want to structure things in a 3, we want to go to that 30,000-foot view and try to get broad and then group it together. This will also really help you cut the fluff. Right, so if we're making our strongest argument, not everything can go in there. It's either fit in or it's not. It's not going to be important to it. Not every detail is important when we give our first presentation, right? Thinking about you've written a motion, you've given pages of information over to the judge, and now you're going to stand up and give your argument. You don't need to hit everything in that motion. You need to hit the strongest things. You need to have strong structure and hit the top things. And the same thing happens with an opening statement. You can't give them everything in the opening statement. It's overwhelming. You will lose them. So you want to make sure you structure it down to those 3 different pieces, right? Rule of 3s. And then everything else can be saved for later. You're going to actually give it more emphasis by targeting it later in cross-exam or direct exam. Okay. All right. Next one is cognitive space. So this just means that when we look at our sentence structure, we make it simple. We don't have long, dense sentences with lots of information. We take those apart and we give simple sentences that are very short and sweet and to the point. Right? So if you're going to talk about a car crash, on July 6th, it was a stormy, rainy night when the car was going eastbound on 35 with slick rain on bald tires. Now, that's kind of a lot. You really want to break that down. There are lots of pieces in there that are helpful to the story, so just take it back. Right? And realize what's really important here. Is July 6th important to what the jury needs to hear? Not likely. So what is it? It's the weather, it's the bald tires, maybe it's you're on a highway. How many lanes are on that highway? So you're just going to break that down, and when you do that, you're giving space for the brain to process. Instead of trying to cram 6 things into one sentence, right, we're spacing it out. And also make it easier on your audience who is listening. All right. Last bonus point I will say, and we will do an entire episode on this because I know how important it is to have a visual presentation that matches what you're saying. So I talked a little bit about this earlier. We talked about showing a picture of an uncontrolled intersection while pairing it with what it is. So in order to grab attention and keep attention, we want to use visuals that convey our message but not duplicate our message. So many times when we're using PowerPoint, we'll just put the words on the screen and then we'll read them. This actually compounds the difficulty of working memory, makes it difficult. So what you want to do is you want to be able to pair your message, right, visually with what you're saying. You don't want it to be a duplication. And when you do that, people will pay more attention. Just typically, people identify as visual learners, even though learning styles have been debunked. That's okay, right? If we want to speak to how each person learns in your audience. And if you have a jury, you have probably many different styles or many different ways that people want to learn. So you're going to hit both of them. You're going to have the visual, you're going to have the verbal, right? And that's going to key in on keeping our 8 seconds, keeping things moving, keeping people's attention, but also allowing some space. Because as you put together your presentation, you're going to want to follow the same rules. If you put a word on the screen, maybe you're going to verbally pair it with a simpler term. You're going to use simple structure on your PowerPoint slides, right? Not dense wording. And then, of course, you also want to make sure when you structure it, right, it follows with what you're saying. So I want to talk a little bit about an example here recently we just had. So I worked with a lawyer. We'd done 3 short virtual focus groups on the same case over a period of a year as they got ready to prepare for trial, to prepare for mediation. Tested many different things. We tested part of the story, pieces of the defense arguments, and then it was getting ready for trial. So we came together for what I would call a strategy session. We each did our own homework, looking at the past focus groups. We wanted to look at what is working, what is not working, and how do we need to structure this opening statement. So thinking through our 8 seconds, we want to know what had to go first, right? Primacy. What would be the hook that we would need to do? And then we also looked at what was working for the defense and what was being tapped into. And again, we're obviously running these focus groups and playing the defense. The point of view that was being tapped into was significantly helping the defense. And so they were tapping into the point of view of the juror as a homeowner. And this particular case involved an injury at business. We knew, okay, we need to get ahead of this. This may need to be the thing you do very first, the primacy. We have to set this out straight for them and in a very simple way. And so that was what we worked on. The rules that a business must follow to keep their place safe and how it's different than a homeowner. So we needed to think about how to educate them very simply, but then also even pair that with questions and jury selection. In that hour that we spent together, we really just worked on what would be first and what had to grab their attention, but also set things straight in a very simple language, very simple structure, right? And then ultimately had to make it very quick. We have those 8 seconds, and then thinking through that visual comparison. Even if our slide had a business building versus a home, that would still be able to bring up different things in their mind on top of what the lawyer would have been saying in opening statement. So we were able to get a lot of work done on our themes, on our structure, and how to get out in front of the point of view that the defense was using to win the case. All right. I hope that this episode was helpful to you. If you are preparing for trial and you want to review your opening statement, maybe look at injecting case themes, I can help with that. There'll be a link in the show notes for a free consultation call if you're interested. All right. Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode. And until next time, thank you.